as well, Miss Alana Wheeler. She's an international counter-trafficking expert. I have to emphasize that. And she brings to the table many, many, many years of study, training, and on-the-job experience, because at the same time, she was the counter-trafficking director of Trinidad and Tobago. She is now doing her own thing professionally, and so we want to support her. We don't want her to go away quietly because she has the information and the knowledge that is required in this world, in this region, what is happening with human trafficking and other areas. And so we want to use her as much as we can to get the information to you. And so I wanted to say a little bit more about herself, a little more details, and then we get into having this conversation. It's not really an interview. It's a conversation about this phenomena, this heinous crime. We can take it step by step because there are so many different areas to it. And this is not a one-time conversation. This is going to be from time to time. She's going to pop in and bring us additional information. So welcome to our broadcast, Miss Wheeler. We are so glad to have you with us today.
Good afternoon, Dr. Greene, and I am very happy to be on your program, and I'm very happy to be online. This is my second radio online experience. Must say, it's a new thing for me, and I'm sure for many. And I'm just happy to be here and to share with the listening audience, whatever part of the world you're in, about human trafficking and what's happening in this part of the world. We are in the Caribbean. So it's a very hot day outside, so sympathy to those who are in colder climates and colder weather, but we are here in the nice, warm, sunny Caribbean.
Great. Some people think it's a blessing, and some people think it's a curse. I know in some part of the United States, it's very cold today. As a matter of fact, it was snowing this morning. Yeah. And I was telling them I can do it a little bit of that, but they wanted my weather.
Yes, indeed. It's always greener. The pasture is always greener on the other side, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because of technology, the technology that we use, it makes it so simple to touch base with our special guests and our co-hosts, because we are not in the same space, but the way she comes across is you swear that she's right here with me in the studio. And that is because we've carefully put some technology together that makes it simple for us to have these awesome conversations. And you can be any part of the world and you want to be a guest, or we ask you to be a guest, you can, as long as where you are is nice and quiet and you have data or Wi-Fi, you could be really in our studios, just like Miss Alana this evening. And for those of you that are listening on all the radio stations out there, WCAN Radio here in Trinidad, you have WCAN Radio in Tobago, Grenada, Hawaii, and all the other places, Canada, the UK. The brand is getting out there and we are having listeners, and it's growing. Over 10,000 listeners per month, and it's growing, and we are really happy, and we want you to know that we really appreciate the fact that you're listening and you send your comments and your well wishes and want to be a part of this Heart Talk Between Sisters movement. So let's get right into it, Miss Alana. We have a lot to cover, but we can take our time because there's no rush to get to the end, because this thing is not something that has an ending. It's an ongoing situation globally. So in a short way, in your own way, can you tell those who are probably hearing it for the first time, which I doubt, but just in case you have people who are listening and doesn't quite understand what is human trafficking, give us in a nutshell what it describe it for us.
Yes, well, thank you again, Dr. Greene, and congratulations on launching this radio station. I think you've been at it for a couple of years. For those listening, human trafficking basically is the exploitation of a person's vulnerability. And persons can be vulnerable for many, many different reasons. If we are looking at the Trafficking in Persons Act, Chapter 1210 in Trinidad and Tobago, they actually identify in the legislation what vulnerability means. And they refer to vulnerability as, for example, a person who has entered a country illegally or without any documentation, a person who is pregnant, a person who has some type of addiction to the use of any substance, a person who has a physical or a mental disease or disability, and simply by virtue of being a child, you can be a vulnerable person. But I want to add to that list also persons who are seeking love, attention, affection, persons who feel that there is a lack or a void in their lives and they are looking for it elsewhere. Those persons are also vulnerable. And I pull the example of, for example, gangs. What gangs do with young persons, with teenagers, is that gangs offer these teenagers, oftentimes the gang leader offers the teenager a father figure or big brother sort of figure. If it's female gangs, it offers a motherly kind of figure, nurturing kind of figure. And the gang members offer that teenager a sense of family, a sense of belonging, a sense of acceptance, a sense of self-worth, a sense of purpose, and that's an area of vulnerability for a person. So that person may not be poor or may not be experiencing poverty or be unemployed or anything. They just simply have a void or a lack in their lives, and somebody comes along to offer that to them. There are some persons who are just seeking love and acceptance, and somebody comes along and offers that love and acceptance to them, and things that probably their parents can't afford for them to get for them, or their family members can't afford to get for them, and this person comes along and offers them these things that they like, because we all have needs. We all have needs, and once we have needs, then it makes us vulnerable to almost anything. So basically anybody can be trafficked and anybody can be a trafficker. The trafficker can be your cousin, your auntie, your uncle, a neighbor, right? A Facebook friend, somebody who you meet online. It can be your boss. A trafficker can be anyone.
I usually call them John Does.
Well, yes, you have here the John Does. Yeah.
John Does, it could be anybody because as I usually tell people, and when I say anybody, we have a way of profiling people because they're educated, they walk around with they may have a nice job, they may drive a good car, expensive car, they may live on the right side of town in the right zip code and a well-to-do area, etc. And when we look at people like that, sometimes we think, oh, they can be trusted. But I usually tell people that in this modern age, crime is dressed up now. So that it has become sophisticated. It has become educational people who are into this and that and have businesses and all of that, living next door to you too. And if you don't take a second look at who's around you or in the lives of your children, in this case, girl children, you may be surprised that they might be involved in some heinous things that when it actually becomes public, you'll be shocked. All right.
Yeah, and you touched on a couple of things there. You talked about business, and a human trafficker is a businessman. Is a businessman or a businesswoman. This is about dollars and cents for them, and that's why when you read on the internet, it says it's $150 billion profitable industry. It's the second or third largest profitable industry after illicit crime, after drug trafficking and arms trafficking, so you hear all of that because it's, at the end of the day, it's dollars and cents, and it's the selling of a human being. It's one human being selling another human being or selling other human beings, which is extreme violation of any type of godly principles or any type of human principles. The selling of another human being, and you have it taking place globally. Babies are sold for different reasons. Sometimes they're sold to be in these ritualistic things, or sometimes they are sold by way of illegal adoption. So you have all those things taking place all over the world, not just in Trinidad. But I remember meeting, I have met victims who have been university students and university graduates. And I do recall a situation of a young person attending a session at a university where they were actually talking to the students about human trafficking. And that student came up to the presenters afterwards and said, hey, I think I was almost trafficked. And they started to relate the story. And the story of this person, this was a young boy, a teenage boy, was that he was approached, his parents came into hard times, and he was at university and they couldn't pay his school fees properly. And, he felt that he needed to help out in the home also. His parents didn't want to drop out of university. So he was, I think he said he was walking on the roadway somewhere, and a vehicle stopped with some men in it. And they asked him if he wanted to come with them, if he wanted to work somewhere or something like that. I don't know how they picked up that he was desperately looking for work because he was just walking on the road, right? And then he said yes, he said yes. And they said, well, okay, we're giving you this number, or give us your number and we will call you and stuff. So he gave them his number, innocently naive. People could be quite naive.
Yes.
And a male person reached out to him and arranged to meet him at a particular town for a particular day and time. And incidentally, the meeting was set up for the day after this student attended this anti-trafficking session, right? Wow. So he was telling the presenters that, I'm supposed to go and meet this person. I don't even know who this person is tomorrow at this particular time. So we stopped him and we said, no, when he started to give us the whole story about how it unfolded and everything. And lo and behold, what it was a male escort service, right? They were looking for male escorts.
Wow.
And he was so desperate, because they told him that he'll get paid like $500, I think, a day or a session or something. And they were going to give him a vehicle and all of that, And the child was desperate. The child needed some type of help and he wasn't getting any type of jobs anyway. And he was a good looking boy, that this was, and what they told him was that the clientele he would get would be very high end clientele.
Wow.
Very, very high end clientele, persons who were in, I don't even want to call the industry, but they were in very high positions in society, in the country. And they would be women. So his customers would be adult women. Wow. Right? This is a teenager you're talking about. And so he was, so we had to, he was in tears. He was in tears when he was recounting what he was about to go into. And thankfully, we were able to prevent him from going in that direction.
Yeah.
Support was offered to him afterwards. I think eventually his parents were able to get back work and stuff. But it was very tough for him because the persons kept reaching out to him for months afterwards. They kept reaching out to him to ask him if he was still interested and if anything. And stuff. And he had to find a way to deflect them without letting them know that he was on to them.
Right. Yes. Two things stand out in what you just said there, which is one, tapping back into what you first started talking about, the vulnerability. And somehow somebody put it really beautiful in a presentation and said that it is the abuse of the vulnerable.
Yes, that's a perfect explanation.
And that came out clearly in what you were saying, and even with this young man. The second thing is the amount of money this industry makes. And I want people to understand, when you're talking about $150 billion, and is a crime only second to drugs worldwide, I want that to sink in a little bit, because why so much money in a modern world where we have technology and educated people and information is flowing left, right, and center, yet you have a heinous crime in an industry that is capable to abuse people's privilege and their human rights and their vulnerability to make $150 billion a year. And that should say something to parents. It should say something to women. It should say something to all of us at how this thing worked to be able to make $150 billion. And when I was doing some research on it, I realized the fact that the human element, human beings are one of the few things that you can use over and over and over. So that in the case of that young man going in, and they already said the kind of clientele, he is now able to serve those clients over and over and over. So it's not like you can finish with it because when the clients come, repeated clients come over and over and over. And I've heard about situations where young ladies, if they last up to 7 years in that industry, being abused and raped, as we call it, over and over by these so-called clients, they in 7 years, they can actually be raped a minimum of 7,000 times. And
Yes,
just think about that.
yeah. So that's a very stark reality. I wanted to add to that, looking back at the whole COVID experience and the shutdown of businesses, persons who have lost their jobs, persons who were put out of apartments that they rented and everything. Thinking of vulnerability, and that was also an example of vulnerability. And I do remember, you heard stories of women coming out and saying that their landlord would say to them, well, if you can't pay the rent, then you need to give it up. And
Right.
I'm talking not just about foreign women, but local women, because of their level of desperation. A lot of people lost their jobs and a lot of people lost their source of income because of the closure and the shutdown and everything. And when you have hungry faces looking at you every morning, right? 2 or 3 or 5 hungry faces looking at you. You yourself, you're hungry.
Right.
And you are in a dire situation and you don't want to be put on the streets. You definitely don't want to be put on the streets. Some women have given in, several women have given in, and then they ended up going to get counseling from these organizations because of what they had to do to survive, And at the end of the day, I think sometimes we tend to look at persons who have been trafficked as these poor, unintelligent persons who were really desperate and everything. But what we forget is that it is about survival. And when a mother has to survive, the mother is not surviving for herself, as she's surviving for her children. And when a child, there are some cultures where children are of the view, or children are programmed in a way where they have to take care of their parents. And you find that a lot, particularly in the Latin American cultures, where the children feel that obligation that when they leave home, they have to send money for their parents. So they actually leave home going to look for work to take care of their parents, especially if the parents are not well. So it is a matter of, it's not just desperation. It is really meeting a need in that person's life, in that family's life, where they just have to help or they have to fill that need in some way, So I want us to also see victims as that, really, persons looking to fill a need and to meet that need in their lives, that desperate need.
Yeah, because it's easy to just be on the sideline looking on because you're not in the situation, or your family is not in such a vulnerable situation.
Yeah, and it's easy to judge. It's very
and
easy to judge and make judgment about persons, So we call them names, we call them prostitutes. I'm not saying that every prostitute is a traffic victim, right? But what I'm saying is that there is a story behind each person, that when we see persons in situations of vulnerability or exploitation, there's a story behind why they're there. They didn't just get there overnight. And I remember another case where there was a young lady who ended up being trafficked here, but she was for forced labor. And when you look at her family history, because that's one of the vulnerable areas that we tend to look at, the family history. That young lady came from a family of abuse. The father was an alcoholic, and the father was abusive to the mother. both physically and verbally abusive to the mother, right? So she was exposed to that her whole life. She doesn't know anything else. And then she ends up in a trafficking situation. So she ends up living in a home where she ends up being exploited to work in a small business. You know, they work long hours, not enough sleep, that kind of thing, not being properly paid and stuff. And, you know, not what she was promised when she was told to come and work. So she ended up in that situation. And then she even ended up in a sexual interactions with the boss person and stuff.
Right.
And so she found herself in a similar situation because there was some physical abuse also, and there was verbal abuse also. So she found herself in a similar situation that her mother was in, and she accepted it as normal because to her that was the norm. You know, that's what I know. So, you know, until the police intervened and she became aware that, oh wow, I didn't know that this was not normal. You know,
Right.
normal. And then when you talk also about second and third generational prostitutes, families of, you know, you have generations of prostitutes or sex workers in a family. And the mother was a sex worker, the grandmother was a sex worker, and the child from a very young age, they groom the children to dress a particular way,
Particular way.
wear makeup, to wear their hair, to wear heels, all of to wear sexy clothing and stuff, so that from a very young age, these children are groomed to sell themselves to men and to market themselves to men. And that's normal for them.
Normal behavior.
Yeah.
Normal behavior within the family.
So
It's
when you
passed
rescue
down.
them, when you identify them and you rescue them now, and you are trying to show them that that is not normal, right? It's not normal for you to sell your body for money, you know. And you know, there's another term they call it transactional sex, right? Some people call it transactional sex, which is, some people call it prostitution, but transactional sex is where you get into a relationship with someone and the person takes care of you. It's not really a boyfriend, right? It's basically you just give them sex, and in exchange for that, they pay your rent, they buy a nice car for you, they see about all your bills and stuff, but they're not your boyfriend, you know? So that's what they call transactional sex. So there are some cultures where that's transactional sex, which is basically prostitution at the end of the day, right? You're selling your body basically to get money, right?
Yeah.
So that is a cultural thing in some cultures, and it is perfectly accepted and perfectly normal. So even when you take a victim out of that trafficking situation, they a lot of times end up in relationships that are very similar to that, where they get boyfriends and the boyfriend sees about them, pays their bills, buys them nice things, and they are basically like, I call it ladies in waiting, ladies of leisure.
Right.
They're able to go to have their nails done, their hair done, because the boyfriend sees about everything for them. And in exchange for that, they satisfy this boyfriend sexually. And then they may have one or two or three boyfriends, right? Where that is done, and that is culturally accepted. So you know, when you're dealing with trafficking in persons, you're also dealing with cultural norms and cultural behaviors that sometimes it's really a challenge, because what is normal in one country or normal in one culture may just be very abnormal in another culture. I'll give you another example. In Haiti, Haiti has what you call the restavex, which is French for I think it's slave. French, it's a French word for slave, right?
Yeah.
So these are children, Haitian children, that are so you know, you have a family where they have a child and the family is not able to take care of the child the way they would like to. So they hand over this child to another family who promises to take care of the child and send them to school and see about them and everything. And when that child goes to that home, that new home, the child ends up doing domestic work all day, not getting to go to much school or schooling, you know, for whatever reason, because the family has him doing domestic work all the time. And sometimes there is abuse, physical, verbal, sexual abuse in the situation. And the parents, the child's parents, sometimes may not be aware, or if they are aware, they can't do better for the child. So they leave the child there, you know, and the child ends up remaining in that situation. So they call that rest of it. So that is a culturally accepted, I wouldn't say norm in Haiti, but it is culturally accepted in Haiti, right? So you find that very few of those cases will really be dealt with by the authorities or addressed by the authorities for several reasons. Number one, the families may not come forward because they really cannot do better for the child. And then number two, it is a kind of cultural norm. That is very normal. Now, we know that according to the United Nations Rights Convention of the Rights of the Child, once a child is under the age of 16, that child is supposed to be in school, right? In school and having some access of social life and play and recreation and all of that. That's the rights of a child, right? So if a child is denied regular education or schooling, denied social life or recreation, then we have violated the rights of that child. So there are some cultures where that's like a no-no. If you look at some of the African countries, well, I know you're familiar with some of the African countries and what goes on there. These things also take place in those countries where children are out of school because they are in some type of bondage or exploitative situation. It could be child soldering, it could be domestic work, it could be bonded labor, right? Where the children are denied the opportunity to go to school. So the trafficking is a very broad,
Very,
things you could discuss and talk about.
And that's why, letting people understand that any layer of vulnerability opens up a can of worms for that particular individual, that child, because it's as though some people could smell, like you said, the young man was walking along the street. Why did they target this young man? And as if he was looking for a job, it's like if they sensed that he was vulnerable, what it is in his body language, what it is about his posture, he's walking, and you would just pull up and pop a question like that. There had to be something even in the way he carried himself that suggested there was some layer of vulnerability. Maybe he didn't walk with confidence. Maybe he walked with his shoulders droop. I don't know what it was, but people who are highly trained in these type of things can sense situations going on in people. Like, they may not understand everything because you never had a conversation, but certainly from looking on at them, they could sense that there is something. Because I understand that children who run away in California, in America, for a better life and get to places like California and you have these people who call them basically scouts that can sense that this child is a runaway child.
Yes.
And approach them because something about them, and their experience in the business says that this is a good child or child to target because of what they see. Let me just, as you're on that topic with the children and all that, there is I can't call it a new phenomenon, because I know one has been as old as some few years while I was living in the States, within the school system. And parents, this is like trying to bring parents up to speed with how things are working. We have the apps. They have certain apps that target the children and they are vulnerable in on those apps. Then there are the color wristbands that speak a language to your fellow students. So I'm not sure of the colors. There is a language of colors within some of the school systems. I know in the United States, where if you wear a particular color wristband, it would suggest to the male or the female, depending on who you're targeting, and without saying anything, what you are actually requesting of that person. So let's just say red means take me to the bathroom and whatever. The other person who's reading it because you wear red doesn't have to say a word, but will oblige in taking you to wherever you want to go sexually. Then there is the new thing that we take for granted with young people, with the short versions of the LOL and all the social media, short wording or sentences. I don't know how you want to call it. But some of them, what is going on right now is that while we may go off on the LOL, which means, laughing out loud and stuff, there's the sexual connotation wording that if as a parent you don't know what's going on, your child could be sitting next to you and sending sexual messages to somebody else, either another student or a grown person. And if you're not hip to it, you'll be none the wiser of how your child is using social media to get sexual messages across, whether it's for prostitution or whatever it is. So then parents have to get up to speed and understand. We have to stop being afraid of the technology and,
Yes.
and educate ourselves to the point that you may not know everything, but at least you may be able to recognize some things and save your child from getting into these vulnerable situations. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, with the technology, I mean, I wouldn't say my age or give away my age, but it's really a challenge for parents now with this technology, because you speak about parents getting up to date with the technology, but it's really it's challenging with the age difference. Babies, you have babies now. You have babies who know how to work the cell phones,
Yes.
right? We have young children who just sometimes you wonder, somebody said, is it that they were born with a chip in their head or something, right? Because they could just pick up a cell phone and work that cell phone and be showing the old parent, sometimes even a young parent, all the
Exactly.
things that the cell phone can do. So it really is a challenge. Yeah? But what I would say to parents is that they need to manage the number one, the types of devices they give their children, the age at which they give the children those devices, and also the number of hours that the children spend on those devices. Because I mean, I grew up, and I'm sure you grew up in a time when we knew about hopscotch and skipping rope and
Yep.
cricket, and you go outside and you get 3 stones and you form that as your cricket, your wicket. And
That's
then you
right.
get another 3 stones and you mark with chalk on the ground and you form your
Mm.
hopscotch boxes. I'm sure the young people listening here don't know what that is, right? And you
Absolutely not.
didn't have to buy the devices in the store. You made them with stones and sticks and chalk and stuff on the road, on the ground. So, but we don't have young people doing that now. Their games are online, with
Yeah.
these things in their hands and the fingers going non-stop. Sometimes they're on 4 and 5 chats at the same time. So the parents have to manage it. The parents have to manage the number of hours they spend on those devices. And I will encourage the parents to take away the devices from them at night when you go to bed. You lock up the devices somewhere. Even if you leave it on your bedside, in the middle of the night, they will come and take the device from your bedside table and go outside. So all 2 o'clock in the morning, you find these young people on these devices. And what activity you think is taking place at 2 o'clock in the morning online?
Mm-hmm.
2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, midnight. What the types of things and the types of sites that will pop up? Because they might
Right.
say, well, oh no, I didn't go on that site, but it pops up because you're there and you're looking at something, and then that leads you into another window, and it leads you into another window. So take away the devices from them overnight. If they are supposed to be at school or in lessons or classes or doing something else, take away the device from them. Do they need to have a cell phone? If you know where they are, you've dropped them off to dance class or swimming class or whatever. And yes, okay, you have to pick them up a particular time and you need to call them when you're outside and all of that and stuff. But there might be other ways to do that, because they might spend the whole swimming class and the whole math
On the
lessons
phone. Yeah.
on the cell phone, sitting down in the classroom, not taking on the lecturer or the teacher and on the cell phone. So the parents have to manage that, because children are children. They are not adults. They are not adults. They are children. They're still learning. They're still young. They're still very naive about life and a lot of things. And so they still do need to be guided.
Yeah. I've heard about stories where children in the middle of the night or the wee hours of the morning walked away from their parents' house without the parents knowing. They were so sound asleep.
Yeah.
And went to meet strangers,
Yes.
or a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and depending on who it is.
Mhm.
And it's because of the same thing you just talked about. No sort of management about how long you should stay on the phone. They're not trying to find out or take away the phone from these kids. So these children have access to these phones 24/7, doing their own thing, and you don't know who they're talking to.
Yes.
There are apps outside here, and I want to send that app to some parents, because I usually do it in presentations. I don't know them offhand, but there are apps. If you download that app on your phone and just sign up, you don't know anybody, within a matter of seconds, a stranger, complete stranger, is going to start chatting with you because they're looking for something, and they feel like if you are here, you obviously are looking for something. And I remember in Tobago, a young a Christian mother was boasting to me, and she was saying, "Well, I know my son, don't be on these kind of stuff," because I was describing those apps, right? I know my son don't be on this stuff at all because this and that and the other. So I showed the parent the app, and she's like, "Oh, these are the app," and the son said, "Oh, that's the app I have on my phone, mom."
Wow. That's amazing.
And I told her, I said, "You see this app? This is a very dangerous app. And if your son is on this, you need to take this off of his phone, and
Yes.
you need to do more management because parents, I know some parents like my mom, I mean, she don't even buy her a smartphone. There are parents that are afraid of laptops. They're afraid of smart devices. They're absolutely scared to even try.
Yes.
And the children knows that. And so the children, like you said, they're born with this chip in their head or something else. And they know this thing inside out. I can remember years ago, I locked the television. In the United States, a bunch of kids was at the house and they were not doing what it's supposed to do when I went out. And I put a lock on the television, actually shut it down. When I came home, I sneaked in the back because like, need something from outside. They found a way to break that lock. And they were watching TV as normal, and they were laughing at me when I got inside.
Yeah, well, I
Because
mean, I'm sure we did that when we were children too, because I mean, I remember, I hope my mom is not listening to this, but I remember when we had the long time phones, the phones with the press buttons.
yeah.
People will know what that is now. Or the phones with the where you turn the thing, the rotor, and you turn
Mhm.
it and stuff, and you pick up this thing with this long cord and stuff. And
Yeah,
they would lock, they had these locks you could buy and lock the phone. But we would find ways to pick the lock or pry open the lock and
that's it.
use the phone and then put it back on. So young people, we always find creative ways to kind of
Oh
work
yeah, oh yeah,
work over the system or work outside the system.
yeah. But there are also accountability apps. In other words, if somebody is not supposed to go on a particular site,
Yes.
once they go on that site, they're supposed to sign up with a partner who will be an accountability partner. The minute
Yes.
you on some of those sites, those sexual sites and stuff like that, it will alert the partner on their phone that
Mhm.
you've logged into something that there's an agreement that you're not supposed to go to. So parents have some help outside there that will give them alerts and stuff like that. So speaking to that, I just wanted to mention that for parents to realize the vulnerability is both near and far, is technological, is everything else. And we are just talking about, the thing that most people talk about the minute they hear human trafficking, they hear sexual exploitation, that's what they hear. But
Yes.
there's so many areas that brings sometimes the the victim eventually into the sexual exploitation. So spell out for us a little bit more of the different areas besides the sexual exploitation. You mentioned just now forced labor, which I think a lot of people haven't explored that because that has a horror story all by itself.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so let's
Yeah.
talk about a little bit about more of the other areas of the trade itself, the crime itself.
Sure. So, well, we know the sexual exploitation is involving the selling of your body in exchange for money, right? That it
Mhm.
takes place in the commercial sex industry. The sexual exploitation also involves the child pornography, for example, is
Mhm.
considered a type of trafficking. And the child pornography, it may not necessarily involve actual penetration, but if it
Mhm.
involves any type of sexual activity, whether it is lewd dancing, it can be oral sex, it could be anything that is sexual activity under the legal definition of sexual activity. And then you also have the child pornography, which is where if you take any part of a child's body, right, their private parts, and you place that out there, whether it is by a WhatsApp message, Facebook posting, social media posting, even if you share it in a telephone message from one
Right.
cell phone to another, you've shared it, right? That is considered child pornography, right? You could even place the child's body part and cut off the part and put it in an adult face and stuff. Once it's confirmed that it is that child's body part, it is considered a type of child pornography, right? So you have that with the sextation. Then you have the domestic servitude, which is basically domestic workers. So, we have housemates, house cleaners, gardeners, people who come and work in the home and stuff. Those persons can be exploited. And they call that domestic servitude. Then you have the forced labor, which can also be child labor, can also kind of overlap with that if it's children. But the forced labor is where the person goes to work somewhere in some business place. So you could be like a doubles vendor, you're selling burgers on the roadside. It could be in a private security firm where you're working as a security guard. It can be it could be agriculture, working the lands. In the larger countries, it could be working in those factories, the brick factories and stuff. Even in the mining industry where they use persons to mine gold and precious stones and all of that and stuff. And these persons are working more, they're working long hours because you have the international labor standards, right? Which is where if you work more than a 40-hour week, you're supposed to be paid time and a half or double time, right? So if you work more than a 40-hour week and you have not been paid appropriately, then those are some labor violations that you have to look at. If you are working for 8-hour shift and you haven't gotten a break, right? They're supposed to get, I think, like at least a 30-minute break or something like that. Then that is also another labor violation. If you work extended hours without getting rest, if you sleep and work in the same place, if you work and you've not been paid any wages at all, and I want to bring up, for example, in FIFA, the last FIFA CONCACAF, that they had in it was Qatar or Dubai, one of those right in
the last World Cup was in I think it's Qatar.
Right. So the last World Cup. So there was a whole host of videos on YouTube talking about the forced labor that took place, right, during the preparation for that World Cup. They brought in a lot of migrant workers to build the stadiums. And those migrant workers, some of them spoke out, but they were afraid to speak out because they were penalized for speaking out. Right. So you had a lot of that taking place, for example, in the construction industry. And the building of buildings and bridges and institutions and all of that, you have forced labor taking place there. So those are some examples. And it could happen with men and women. It could happen with children, right? So that's forced labor. Then you have slavery or practices similar to slavery or any type of servitude, all right? And that could be any type of bondage. If the person is held in duress, held against their will in a space, and they may not even be made to do any type of activity, but any type of activity they might be asked to do anything, then that could be considered a type of trafficking. And then you have the bonded labor, or debt bondage, they call that, which is where you owe a debt because these persons have arranged for you to come to work in this place, right? So they may have invited you to work in a different country, or they may have invited you to work in another part of within your country, and they've paid your fees, they paid your transportation, your travel, they provide meals for you, they provide accommodation for you, and then they tell you, well, you have to work to pay us back this money that you owe. That's called bonded debt bondage or bonded labor. So you are indebted to those persons, and they continue to increase your debt because if you're owing them money for food and transport and accommodation, then the longer you live there, the more they feed you, is the more your debt increases. So the debt never ends and the debt continues to increase. So you're eternally indebted to these persons, right? And it's almost impossible to pay them off because the debt is so high and so ridiculous, that it's not practicable for you to ever pay them off. Your only way out of that is really to escape and to go to the authorities and make an official report, because you never earn any money at all. All the money that you work for basically goes back into paying the debt. Your family doesn't even get the money sometimes, or your family may get maybe 1% of what you've worked for, because they claim that the rest of the money is towards paying back your debt. So those are just a few examples of trafficking. And we have forced marriage, right? Which is
Mhm,
where
mhm.
children are forced to marry persons. It's an arrangement made with these persons, and the family is paid money, basically. So the benefit accrues to the family for forcing their child to marry this person, right? Then you have the illegal adoption, or even babies that are sold, and sometimes babies are sold to be sacrificed for ritualistic, all kinds of ritualistic purposes, and babies are sold to families or parents who they can't have children, and so this mother decides that she's going to have this baby born, and at the hospital she signs over the paperwork to the parents. So it's an adoption that takes place, but it's an adoption that takes place outside of the legal process. And then money, the family then pays that mother large substance of money for having the baby, the child.
Wow. No, you see why this thing makes a lot of money, and
Yeah.
and the people who are listening right now, all the listeners around the world that you're listening to Heart Talk Between Sisters with Miss Alana Wheeler, who is an international counter trafficking expert, and we are just skimming the surface of discussion. This is the first discussion in a series of discussions that we're going to talk about this phenomenal crime, because we want people to understand it not from just talking at it from a professional standpoint. This thing is right in your neighborhood. This thing is in your community, and unless you get the information as we are giving it to you, it will be right in front of you, or your children could be involved in it, and you wouldn't know a thing. Hence the reason we are discussing this. We are discussing this so that you can be safer. You can function at a level that is safer. Families need to function in a way, parents with children need to function in a way within the family. There's a protocol that you need to follow. As you get information, you put some of these safety practices into the family. Not that anything bad would not happen to you, but the minute you begin to operate in a safer mode through education and all of that, with the information that we're giving to you, you find that you might be in a safer position. You would observe more things. You would avoid certain things, and you would be able to inform your children. Fathers and mothers would be able to inform their children better on how they should operate when even the parents are not there. And so Miss Alana is taking time to go through step by step. The next time she comes, we're going to talk about something else. We're going to go deeper in different areas because, like she said, she just called it a whole lot of areas. I mean, one of the areas she talked about just now was the different things in different countries. I remember with a contact I had in a particular country, I think was Pakistan, and they slipped me some pictures of kids, little children and mothers that were making bricks listen, and this was horrible to look at. I got the pictures and I was like, and he said, I would love you to come to Pakistan, but this is dangerous stuff.
Yes.
And if they would know that I gave these pictures, my life would be in a situation, right? Knowing that I sneaked these pictures out, because the pictures were children under the ages of 7 and under, and their mothers. They were making bricks by hand.
Yes.
And this went right into the area of, we should talk about forced labor and all these different type of things. These underage children who should be in school. And
Yes.
every aspect of their lives were being violated. No human rights. And we can tell you stories upon stories of the mining industry, of people who have gone into some of these areas and saw the conditions under which children work. And don't think that some of the things may not be in Trinidad, but some of the things, as far as the labor laws and all that kind of stuff, I know of institutions when she started talking about if you don't get paid at a certain time and you don't get a break for 8 hours to have lunch. And I'm not talking about foreigners working there. I'm talking about local people who you would think is normal. But because the person who's the boss has the connections and knows that if the people report it, the backlash on them for reporting them, they take advantage of women. They take advantage of these women who are desperately looking for work to take care of their family. And now they have to be subject to working 12 hours and no break. And if they take lunch, is a problem. Or they have to take lunch right on the job there, and they can't take an hour. None of that is accounted for. And that's happening right in Trinidad and Tobago as well. So
Yes,
we
yes.
are talking about these things, and don't think that it's so far-fetched in some foreign land. We're talking this thing in a global thing, but it's right here. One of the things I want you to address, Miss Alana, is something that is a sweeping thing going on in the United States and in other countries. There is a situation going on with massage parlors, and massage parlors being used as a front for clandestine type of operations in regards to what we're talking about. So that people come in and they set up a massage shop. And who doesn't like a massage shop? Everybody likes going to take a massage every now and again, to feel good and all of that. But what is happening within some of those industries now is that they have things that they call extras. So that you have women who are in the same situation, vulnerable situations, that maybe working in industries or get a job there. And when you go in to get your little massage, you can get a different type of a treatment or additional treatment based on sexual sexual things in the shop. And I've known of instances within the United States. I haven't heard anything here in Trinidad. I'm not doubting it's here as well. That that the law enforcement comes in and finds something different going on in the back. And there's a new thing that I met someone when I was in the waiting room in TV6. They came to a conference here in Trinidad, and they were hotel managers, and they were given special training to recognize when something funny like that is happening at the hotels. Because from what I gather, a lot of times what is happening now is that they are going into the hotel industry, renting rooms for these vulnerable women, prostituting them so that you have a clientele coming all day, all night for these women. And in some cases, either the hotel manager is involved in it or somebody's at the front desk is getting a cut off for it. And management does not. Talk a little bit about that. I think they call it something about some hotel something, but I know it's something that is creeping in. I don't know if it's here in the Caribbean yet, but talk to those two areas, the hotel and the massage parlor.
Yeah, well, you just said a whole mouthful there. Well, we're talking here about massages with happy endings, as they call them.
Right.
And this is how the advert. So yes, I'm aware, there are hotels in our own country here in Trinidad and Tobago where that is happening. There are guest houses where that takes place also, but there are also hotels in Trinidad where the staff are trained regularly. In fact, there's mandatory staff training. I know Marriott International in particular, they are very stringent, right? And there's mandatory training every year. Every year, the staff receives mandatory training. It's part of their HR policy with respect to training their staff on identifying traffic and indicators with the hotel guests and in the hotel compound, and also what the protocols are for reporting it. So there are hotels that have those standards. But unfortunately, we have, you have these smaller hotels that are not part of an established chain, and you have these small guest houses where, unfortunately, persons can go and rent rooms. They can rent a room for, there's an hourly rate. Once you see an hourly rate advertised, we know what's happening there, right? So, and then you have the hotels and guest houses that have the arrangements with these, with the traffickers who are also businessmen, businesswomen, and they rent the rooms, where the girls are staying. So sometimes the clients go to the girls at those guest houses or hotels, or the client rents a room to use the services, to engage the young lady, basically. So they may rent the person for a night. They may rent him or her for 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours, and there's a fee. There's either an hourly fee or it's an all-night fee that's attached to it. And yes, there has to be some complicity with those hotels and guest houses, because you must see a pattern. You must see a pattern where the same person is coming, or you see these girls coming, and victims. While we know, okay, a person who is engaged in commercial sexual activity, the young lady, they're all pretty, they look pretty, they dress nice, makeup, everything and stuff. But there's body language. There's something called body language. There's something called something is not right, a gut feeling. Something is not right about this situation, And we could pick up on those things as human beings, because God made us this way. God made us this way to be able to sense certain things when something is not right, it's wrong,
Yeah.
and to know that to ask a question or to probe a little more to find out. So even as the hotel staff and the hotel employees, they themselves, because they tend to monitor all their guests, they know the regular guests, by name, first name, and all of that. And sometimes they may not want to say anything, because at the end of the day, the hotel wants business.
Exactly.
So whoever they get business, they're just happy for the business. They don't really care what the guest comes to do.
Right.
There is that perspective. And then there's also the other perspective of, if a guest is paying to stay at a hotel, then who is the hotel management or staff to go and tell the guests who they can and cannot have as visitors?
Right.
Because that's the argument they will give. We can't tell the guest who could come and visit them and who can't come and visit them.
Exactly.
So you have that also. But, there are still things that can be done at the end of the day to really not be facilitating or complicit in supporting the human trafficking, the business of human trafficking, as we call it, right? And then, of course, you have the massages with the happy endings that I was saying. I don't need to explain what that is, right? But spas, we're going back to spas. You do have a lot of spas, and you have a lot of spas popping up in residential areas. So they rent a house, they rent a 3 or 4 bedroom house in a nice residential area. And sometimes they provide the transport to the house. So you don't have that red flag of different cars parked up in the house at all hours of the night. So they will provide the transport to and from the house. So it doesn't raise anything from the outside. But in the inside, what they do on the inside of that house is that they reconfigure the house, so that they reconfigure the house where a part of the house has a front desk area. So where the girls could come out and parade themselves in front of the desk, kind of thing, for the guest client who comes in. And then the bedrooms are reconfigured in a way where it's just small enough to fit up just a bed and maybe a bucket with water or a sink or something like that. So each room kind of could service a client, sort of thing. So so you have a lot of those spas, and they don't have signs or anything, of course, because it's in a residential area. But people know, because they advertise. They have their group that they advertise on WhatsApp or Facebook or however they choose to advertise, right? And the clients are brought to the spas and stuff for those services.
Wow. And we just touched we skimmed the surface of this thing, because, time is upon us already. When you're having fun, you think an hour is a whole long time, and you got to be wondering what to say, and the hour is gone.
The hour is gone, yes. Time goes very quickly.
Time reads on no man, it goes by quick when you're having fun. And so we're going to kind of have to close off for today, but it's not the end of the conversation. I usually say the conversation continues. And so we will find another appropriate time, a day and time, when we will have Miss Wheeler again to continue this conversation, because we have a lot to talk about. In closing off, Miss Wheeler, you're on Hard Talk Between Sisters, and we have a slew of radio stations spanning the world that is listening to your conversation and your comments. Talk to the women, because this conversation should resonate with women, young ladies, older women's parents, mothers. Tell them something in closing off. As a sister, as a fellow Hard Talk Between sister, tell them something.
Well, what I would say to the woman is that, there's no need to be ashamed or embarrassed about if you find yourself in a situation that we spoke about earlier, and there is always a trusted friend or a confidant, someone who you can go to, who you could confide in. If you find yourself in any type of situation, it may not be a trafficking situation, it may be some type of situation where you're being taken advantage of and you kind of want out, you know. And I just want to appeal to you to please, reach out to some trusted person for help. There must be someone you can trust, whether it's a pastor, a reverend, a social worker, some NGO or civil society group that you can go to, who you can trust and confide in. Even if you do trust law enforcement or anyone like that, but go and talk to someone about your situation. If you find yourself on the brink or on the border of giving in to being exploited, reach out for help. Reach out for help. There are always persons willing to help. Trust me, there are always persons willing to help. But please reach out for help and don't keep it to yourself, but really ask for help and seek help. I really just want to encourage you, and please not to be ashamed or embarrassed about finding yourself in that situation. It could happen to any one of us. Exactly. Any one of us it can happen to. And so do not be afraid or embarrassed or ashamed, And for those of you who believe in God and you believe that the Bible is the word of God and that the Bible is true and everything, you have the word of God as your refuge, and you have God as your refuge who you can run to for help and for guidance, and God will lead you to the right persons who would be able to help you and guide you. The selling of human beings is an abomination. It is an abomination, and it is an evil in our society. And we are not to endorse it, support it, facilitate it in any way, because it can happen to any one of your children. It could happen to your niece. It could happen to your nephew, your sister, your mother, your brother. It could happen to any one of you. So if you are part of facilitating it or encouraging it or turning a blind eye to it, just remember that the tables may turn on you one day. And what would you do if that was your family member in that situation? You would want somebody saying something about it. So I encourage you, please speak out about it. Thanks again, Dr. Greene, for having me on the program.
I am delighted. And when you started, you said off the air, we said some things about remunerations and all of that. Just in case there's somebody on the stations that is listening right now and want to get in touch with you, you never know. Please give our contact information.
Sure.
That they can contact.
My WhatsApp, you can contact me via WhatsApp, or if you're in the jurisdiction of Trinidad and Tobago, it's 1-868-743-4133. That's my cell phone and WhatsApp number. Or you can send me an email at awheel, awheel.ma@gmail.com. Thank you again.
Thank you again. Thank you for being with us today on Heart Talk Between Sisters. We do appreciate all the information, and we look forward for a continued conversation at some point in time that we agree upon. God bless you in all that you do, and talk to you soon again.
Okay, goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye. Well, I've been talking to Miss Alana Wheeler, international counter-trafficking expert, resides right here in Trinidad and Tobago. And she's just given us an hour of her precious time, informing us about human trafficking and some of the elements that it brings with it. This heinous crime that continue to sweep the world, and people are just either in disbelief or blown away with the fact that it does so much damage. Is so poisonous to our society. It makes so much money. Or children, or girl children, or boy children, everyone, as she said, once there's a layer of vulnerability, is fair game. These people this is business. You are commodity, and it's hard to think about it that your child or you could become a commodity, but it's there. And we will do everything in our powers through the mediums that God has given to us, especially the radio stations and Heart Talk Between Sisters, to bring to you all the relevant information, not just about human trafficking. There's so many other things. We're going to talk about domestic violence. We're going to talk about love. We're going to talk about respect. We're going to talk about relationships. We're going to talk about banking. We're going to talk about nothing is off the table when it comes to the conversations that we're going to have on Heart Talk Between Sisters. So join us every Sunday at 3 p.m. Atlantic time and 3 p.m. Eastern time. If you don't live in those areas, I'm sure you can be able to figure it out based on the time I just gave to you. You'll be able to figure it out as to when is the best time. As you know, 3 p.m. Atlantic is going to match up to some time in your time. If you're in Pacific time, if you're in Mountain time, you're going to be able to figure it out. Share the link with as much people. Join the Facebook phenomenon that's going on. Women are joining every day. Heart Talk Between Sisters. Search for it on Heart Talk Between Sisters. Share the link for people to listen to the broadcast. We have several radio stations. I've shared one with you. If that's all you want to share, I Can Talk, so WCAN Radio.us, go to our website. You will see a slew of radio stations here. And remember, this is not the last thing I'm going to say to you this evening, but I want you to remember this as well. What we're doing is independent broadcasting. We don't have a sponsorship. We don't have a big corporate sponsorship. What we have is people who kind of could see what we're doing and understand the vision. And those people dig into their pockets and say, you know what? I like this. I can support this, not just by listening, but I can support this by being a sponsor. If you are such a person and you want to sponsor us, and you go to our website, WCAN Radio.us, go to the sponsorship page. I think it's right on the front page. You will see areas for you to sponsorship. There's several options there, from $5 all the way up. If you're a corporate sponsorship, and this is something that you're listening to, whether you live in Trinidad and Tobago or in a foreign country, we have ways and means right on that page that anyone living anywhere can be a financial sponsor and support us financially, because it takes finance to run this. It takes finance to develop this. The station, the websites that we have, they're all fitted with a language feature that if you're not speaking English, you could understand everything that is written on the station in 65 different languages. So go to the station, WCAN Radio.us. When it pops up, it's going to be in English. Look for your language in the left-hand corner of the website. You're going to see it says language. And once you click on it and you find your language, it's going to convert, whether it's in Greek or Russian or German or Italian or African, is going to convert, and every single word in that station is going to be converted in a language that you could recognize and you could understand. Share everything that we've done here with as much people as you can, because we want to make this a world phenomenon where women from every walks of life participate in this, be educated, again for joining us and sharing those potent information with us. We look forward to you joining us again next Sunday at 3 p.m. And we're always looking for sponsored home. You know, we have people who can say, look, come and do the show at our house, whether it's virtually or physically. You know, if you're Trinidad and Tobago, then definitely we can do that. If you live outside of Trinidad and Tobago, you can do it virtually by being the sponsor for the day, the house that is going to join as a co-host with us, and we can share the video camera and all that and be part of the conversation. And then we're going to have some light hors d'oeuvres and stuff like that. And after the thing, we call it an after party. And we're going to enjoy ourselves and talk about it. So all of these things are things that we are adding to the show to make it palatable so that you can enjoy it and that you can feel good in inviting somebody to be part of this. This is Dr. Greene. This is, they call me Doc. Thank you for joining me, and we see you next time. God bless.